Hello everyone, my name is Peter Felf and I'm from the University of Sydney, and this is the second part of the tutorials for the AtomBlend plugin, which is a Blender plugin for AtomProp data. And in the second part we're actually going to talk about how to do proper visualization, what techniques you've got available, and I'll put off animation for a third tutorial because it demands us to go a little bit into the interface of Blender and what's there. And so in principle for AtomProp data we've got two techniques for visualization. The first one is called a so-called halo material. And what a halo material is actually you're putting a picture of what you want your atom to look like at the position of each atom. We usually just use a colored circle with a black rim. Does a pretty good job. So you can see an image here that's from a recent paper we had in Scriptum Materialia about corrosion, about high temperature corrosion, and you've got the brownish carbon atoms at the boundary. You've got the green nickel atoms and the blue oxygen atoms and the dark blue chromium atoms. And this is actually a very nice visualization for anything that's sort of a cross-section appearing like image, or anything where you're rather zoomed out. So if you're zooming out far enough, anything that's supposed to look like a sphere will look sort of like a circle anyway, so you're not going to have the 3D appearance of it anyway. And so you're going to be using this technique, not just because of its appearance, but also because it's a lot faster to do. And the second one is using so-called dupli verts, which means we're duplicating a certain object. In the case of AtomProp data, we're always going to be duplicating spheres, even though you could use something else. You could use a cube, you could use a monkey, you could use whatever you want. And we duplicate it at each and every position of an atom, and then that gives you a very plastic appearance. That makes sense if you've got if you're close up and personal with your data. So this is a recent example that I've been showing around a lot, which is the title page of Angewandte Chemie we had recently, and it's a nanoparticle. So a nanoparticle is obviously relatively small, so you're going to be relatively close to the atoms, and you want to give it this 3D look. So yeah, let's get straight into it. Just to show you sort of what a setup like this would look like. I've actually used this one, so you can already see this is the actual file I've created this from. There's a model for the knife, and there's a model for the silver atoms, and there's a model for the gold atoms. Right, we've loaded in there, and sort of because of the artistic appeal of the whole thing, there's obviously another slice here of silver and gold atoms. And then the camera is up here. It's perspective view in this case. Mostly we're going to be using orthogonal. And yeah, that's sort of really all there was to creating this image. Actually, on top of creating the AtomProp analysis, this was actually probably less than an hour's worth of work. Anyway, we'll start from scratch. So open up a new file, read out the startup file. And this is going to be our starting point. So first we're going to do the halo material, as I said. So we're going to just delete the cube and the lamp. Sorry, I'll switch on the where do we have? Oh, it's 2.72, sorry, so there's no screencast keys. Let me fix that. So you're going to be using always the latest version of Blender. For my video tutorials, I'm using a little bit of an older version called 2.71. Simple reason for that is that it has this it's the last version and has the screencast keys, so that you will be able to see what I'm doing. So you can see every key press here. Anyway, we'll select those again, delete them out, and load our data in. So you've got AtomBlend installed, I assume. I select the POS file. I'll just use my grain boundary reference file again, grainboundary.pos, and the artificial range file to it. Don't pay too much attention to what the actual names of the elements are. It's something that I've just created in MATLAB. We want to bake to object atomic. That's fine. And in a couple of seconds we will have we will have the data appearing. This is about 10 million atoms in total, and you can see it's still fairly zippy. Switch off the silicon, because that's not going to make too much of a difference. Maybe actually what we might do is make a cross-section like the one that I showed you earlier. So this way you'll see the merit of this side of this sort of visualization, really. So we'll go to orthogonal view. Just for data, there's a lot of merit of doing that. And just like in the earlier tutorial, in order to actually add the halo material, all we really need to do is click Add Halo Material, but that's only because we've made it easy for you. If you wouldn't have AtomBlend, I know it's a bit of a bad example, but if you wouldn't have AtomBlend, you would have to do all of this by yourself. And I'm actually going to be going with you through all the settings so that you understand what they mean. That's why this tutorial is, of course, a little bit longer. If you're interested in how to do the whole thing with spheres, you will need to scroll to a later point in this video. So let me just go and grab the camera so that we can make sure that the camera is somewhere outside and somewhere positioned properly. Again, camera settings, very important, so we might as well just start out with the camera settings. So GZ to grab it in the Z direction. And as I mentioned before, we've got perspective on orthographic mode. If you don't know what the differences are, look them up. So perspective is the way you would perceive the world is in perspective mode. So things that are closer to you are bigger and things that are further away are smaller. And you can do the same thing in Blender. And what you can change is the focal length of your camera. So the longer the focal length, the more orthogonal it would actually look. But we'll only do that for renders like the ones that go on title pages, things like that, that have a bit of artistic appearance. We're going to be using orthographic so that we can actually work with the scale of our data set. We'll make it large enough. You can see the perspective, the angle we're having towards our data set might not be optimal, but we can correct it a little bit later. And the next thing we're going to do is go to a render setting. I use 1024 by 1084. Always work with powers of 2. It's your friend, makes it easy to do analysis on your images or whatever you like to do with your images. Cutting them in half goes easy, things like that. So you can see we've got a pretty good perspective onto our AtomProp dataset, and we can actually see the entire dataset. But just as a precaution, if you go into the camera, you can see camera limits here, so you can see which parts are going to be visualized. And with the 100 nanometers clipping in this case, we're getting everything from here to here. So just to show you what will change if I change that to 10, it doesn't visualize anything that's closer than this, but this is 0.1 anyway. And we might just set that to 100, so everything is going to be visualized. You can actually use that to make things like fly-through movies through your data. I've just created one today. Makes it very simple because you can animate how long this clipping distance should be. Anyway, so all this is well and good. And if we go back into camera mode, camera view, maybe grab it upwards a little bit so that it's nice and in the middle. We're already good to render. So you can see this is your render. But there's a few things we might want to tweak. So the first thing is we might want to have a background that's not gray. So depending on where it's going to go in terms of background, you will choose probably either white or black. So just as a general rule, of course you might have your own reasons to do it differently. But of course for print you need a white background usually, and for movies you need a black background. That's just in tendency, but generally what we do is actually, I'll just set it to a white background. If I go render then, you can see that this is a usable image. However, the bigger difference for print or movies is that usually for print we don't want to have a background at all. So you can go and set alpha mode to transparent in the plugin and then click render. And you can see you've got the checkerbox pattern in the background, which means we've got a transparent background. This has the upside that if you create a figure and you want to move images close together, then you don't need to crop anything. Even though in this case we might want to go and change X to 512, and you can see it still fits, and that also saves you a little bit of space. So what do these things all mean? So one of the parts of this tutorial is actually showing you what the background of this visualization techniques is. And what we've done right now is actually for each vertex we've produced we've just put a picture there. And this picture is called a halo material. So what a material is just it tells the renderer how to visualize a certain object. And in this case, so for Blender, we've got four possible ways of doing that. One is surface, which is standard. So that's what you would use in order to display your object as if you've got a mesh object. You can use it as a wires, so which means if you've got a mesh object, all the edges will be drawn. Volume, we're not going to go into that. You can actually do volumetric rendering. So if you have a voxelization of your data, you can render that, but that's a bit of an advanced thing. We're going to go into that maybe in a later tutorial. But very important for us is halo, which is usually used for things like pixie dust or smoke, things that are displayed as particles. And in the halo settings, there's a couple of things that we've tweaked. So we've just taken a lot of these manual steps, thrown them into a script, and that's what's executed if you click Add Halo Material or Remove Halo Material, and if you edit the material. Just to show you what it looks like for the silicon, if we would click on the silicon, there's no material defined yet. But we're going to do something else maybe with the silicon. Let's see how this tutorial goes. But it's not defined by itself. You actually need to go and define it. But we've actually done the hard work for you, as I said. So you just click a button and the material is there and set up for you. But so what does the whole thing look like? So it's got a color. So if you change the color here, it's the color here. So you can change it here. You can see it updates the other color, and you can, I don't know, make it a light blue if you like. And then you've got a transparency value. So these are the most important things that you need to tweak. If you set up a halo material yourself, then this will not all be done for you. So I might actually just do that with you with the silicon, set up a halo material, and you will see that it's 10 million points, but it still will render at a reasonable speed. So for the silicon material, we'll just go and add a new material. And it's got a new material applied to it, and we want it to be a halo material. So what I'm doing now is just everything that the button will do just in steps. And you can see it's a bit fuzzy because it's made for, as I said, for things like, if you wave a magic wand, sort of dust that comes off there. The first thing we want to change is the hardness. We want the hardness to be 0. So we want to have a circle that has a distinct edge. So we'll set that to 0. One thing that I've just noticed is it's probably because I'm doing the screencast recording, but it's slowing down a little bit. So one thing we might actually do is downsample our data set, downsample the silicon in this case. And the way we do that is just we separate, either we duplicate the silicon and delete 95% or whatever, however many percent we want of the current silicon. Or what I'm going to do is we're not going to need the silicon for anything later anyway. We're just going to delete 95% of all silicon atoms so that we just end up with 5% of the rest. And we do that by going onto edit mode. So to explain to you what edit mode is, it's just hit the tab key and you're in edit mode. And edit mode allows you to edit the mesh. It allows you to edit the vertices, and later when we're gonna have analysis objects, it also allows you to edit the mesh of the objects, which is very important. Actually, the reason why I started using Blend, or one of the reasons. So by default, all vertices are selected. You can see the individual ones because they are, it's one big mess. But by default, they're all selected. So I'll just press A to deselect them all. And you'll see everything goes black. And then I'll just go select random. And we want to select 95% of the atoms because we only want to have 5% left. It's just 95. Enter. Then move your cursor back into the 3D view. Press X. And delete vertices. So click on vertices. They should all be gone now. Sorry, I'll just make sure that we're not going to change the position of the camera anymore. So if I go up, oh, that's unticked already. It's good. So I don't need that anymore. You can see now it's still not zippy because it's trying to remember for the next couple of steps where those vertices were in case we wanted to go back. But you'll see in a couple of steps it will speed up. So as you can see some individual vertices by now. So if I go and select, you'll see I can select individual ones, or I can go and circle select, say a bunch here, and do stuff with them. But that's not what we're going to do anyway. So I'll deselect that and tab out of edit mode. And I think sort of now we're getting a lot faster. Anyway, so we've done that. Next step is hardness is 0. Size is probably a little bit too large, so we'll make it maybe 0.2 because we're going to be looking close to the surface. The color, we're going to pick silicon, usually I don't know, gray. And then what you'll see if I render it now, actually that's already a basic setup, and I've used that before to render these things. You can see it already looks quite okay. The only thing is we're gonna add the texture, because if I go select the camera and well, not zoom in but change the orthographic scale so that we are sort of zoomed in, you will see that what we call the hafnium atoms, they've got these circles around them, but the silicons don't. And in order to change that, we'll go onto the silicon again, into the material, and add a texture to the material. So what the texture is, it's just some sort of image that's applied to this thing here. So we'll tick that, and it's all there. And then go onto the texture panel. So it's this checkerboard here. You click on that and add a new texture, and the texture type will be image or movie. And we're going to select that image that we want to use, which is just a white circle with a black rim that I think would have, not a new one, my bad, open. I've got it saved on my desktop, but I'm pretty sure it came with the AtomBlend pack. If not, so just click C alpha so you can see what it looks like. If not, you can easily create something like that in Illustrator or Inkscape or whatever your favorite vector or pixel program is. And then what we need to change is the influence, and we want to influence the color, and we want to influence the transparency, we want to influence the alpha value, and our blend mode will be multiply. And so once we've adjusted all of that, we actually have arrived at the exact same location that we were with the automatically generated material. Just wanted to understand how to do that, because you might have a reason to use a different kind of image, a different kind of texture, and it's not particularly hard to actually do that. Now you can see it's all there. But there is something in the blend mode that's not 100% right. What did I change in the blend mode? Texture, no, it looks all fine. Use alpha, that's fine. Color alpha, multiply. Use alpha straight. Did I have that straight? Next thing is troubleshooting. So occasionally we'll need to do some troubleshooting as well. And it seems that I have actually forgotten what the difference was. Anyway, I'm not gonna dwell for too long on this, because otherwise, I'm gonna waste the time. And if I find out what I did different, I'll just post it on the web page, and you'll be able to see that as well. Anyway, you can see that there's a contrast now between the atoms, and you're able to discern which one's which. It sort of looks like a little bit like you've put coins on top of each other. But especially if you're after a sort of flat look, you can cross sections and things like that. That can be very helpful. One setting I have not gone through was the alpha. So alpha is the transparency. It's just a linear transparency. And just to show you what the effect is, if we give it 0.5 alpha, you can see that that they are sort of a bit faint, whereas the fully opaque hafnium atoms are shining through a little bit. So that's actually it for the halo material, really. The halo material is fast, as you can see. It's very convenient, and it does a really good job with the visualization. And I've been preferring it for a while now in order to do most of my visualization. But occasionally, like in the case of the nanoparticles, you come across a case where you want to do it differently. So you can see this is now a grain boundary, and we'll just move it so that you can look from the side. But one thing that you, I think, get a good impression of with this already is that I might just switch the silicon off, the visibility of silicon off. Is that with a little bit of, you've got a lot more freedom here, and you can, for example, do things like go into the tab for the silicon and even crank that down a bit further, which gives you the opportunity to visualize just your matrix, or emphasize your matrix versus your emphasize the solid versus the matrix, and do things like that. In order to do the other type of visualization, which is using spheres, is vertex duplication. Again, we've got everything automated for you, and I'll show you the automated version, and then I'll show you the manual version. And as far as it goes, as far as combining the two concerns, actually you can have both things at the same time, and I'll show you then an easy way to switch between one and the other. So I'll go again into the 3D view of the hafnium. Now that we have the halo material, actually it doesn't automatically allow you to put in the dupli vert material, which doesn't actually matter too much, because it means I can show you how to manually do it. And in order to manually do it, you just add an icosphere. So you go Shift A for Add Mesh, and then you go Add Icosphere, and give it, and the icosphere actually needs to be at the origin. Oh, sorry, let me go back. So the first thing is you go and select your mesh, and go Shift S for Snap, Cursor to Active, which is where it was already, just to show you need to do that. Then Shift Add Mesh Icosphere, which adds the icosphere exactly at the origin of our mesh, so that things are later not offset. You can leave the subdivisions to 2. You might actually crank it down and use the subdivision surface modifier later. Actually, we're going to do that so you can see the effect of that. And the size, I'll make it 0.2. So it's a relatively small one, or let's make it 0.4 anyway. And so what we need to do now is, I'll just change the name of it, so it's easy to find, hafnium atom. We'll make the hafnium atom a child of the hafnium object. You can very simply do that by grabbing it, so you can see I've got it now, and I'll drop it on there, and now duplicate it. What it automatically does also is it tells Blender that it's no longer going to be using the material, the halo material that we set up for the hafnium, but instead uses the hafnium atoms for the visualization. And it puts one atom at each vertex of our mesh. Well, there's no mesh, it's just the vertices by themselves. So it's going to put one everywhere where there's an atomic position of that. And in order to tell Blender to do that, you go into the Object tab, and you go down to where it says duplication and click on verts. And that now has created a one atom per vertex, and maybe I have made it a little bit too large. So let's make it a little bit smaller. It's 0.8 nanometers right now. So it was radius 4, sorry, I got that wrong. So we just use S for scale. 0.5, so it's now half size, and that looks pretty okay. Of course, the hafnium atom needs to have its own material. Things, as you can see, slow down a little bit just because now we've got a lot of geometry in our scene. And we'll add a new material. Surface material, and the surface material can have a diffuse color. You can tweak the material settings. There's heaps of tutorials out there on material settings. You can tweak them to your liking. Make it green right now. Call it hafnium surface. Again, usually it goes faster than that, but I think it's because I'm doing a video tutorial. And we'll click on the little camera here to switch the rendering off for the silicon, because now we'll just want to see the hafnium, and get cracking with the render. And what you can see now is that there's actually nothing happening, everything's black. The reason for it being black is because there's no light in the scene, so none of the objects, none of the spheres actually receives the light. And there's two ways that we can actually bypass that. Well, the first thing is we can work without lights. And a way to do that is to just make the material shadeless. And what that means is that the material is just drawn as a solid color, which may sound like it's not very useful because it again reverts us back to the whole halo material situation. But it is actually very helpful when it comes to rendering surfaces that are not supposed to receive light, like anything that's got information, like an interfacial axis map, because you want to accurately reproduce the colors. But as you can see, it renders nicely. It's just not, it's like it doesn't look any different from the halo material, of course. And I might actually go and change the camera to close up to look closer to the sphere so that you can actually see in more detail what's going on. So I'll just change that again to 10 nanometers. And go render. And you can see it's very low poly icosphere, and it's all just one color. So let's go back to the hafnium atoms and their material. So if we don't make the material shadeless anymore, we need some light in the scene. And the easiest way to get some light in the scene is actually to have environment lighting. You can use lamps as well. There will be tutorials somewhere else about how to set up lighting properly and all of that. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but an easier one is to have environment lighting and ambient occlusion. and have ambient occlusion as well. We'll do that another day. Just environment lighting and press render now, and you can see they're receiving light. It's a little bit noisy, simply for the reason that there's a lot of geometry in the scene, but also we've just used a few samples. So if you just crank that up, the samples for the renderer, you'll see it takes a little bit longer. So there's a difference very often between your production render, what you would consider your production render, and your the initial render. But I think you get the idea that by cranking up the samples, you'll just get a finer render. But I think it becomes pretty obvious what the whole thing looks like. I'll set that back to 12 samples. I think should be enough. Just give it another try. You can see it renders twice as fast. It's just gotten a little bit noisier. And there's not a lot of shadows happening in there just because of the way we set up the lighting. But you can get the idea that if you would play around a little bit with lighting, it would start looking pretty okay. So if I go outside and go into camera view, and you can see that we can actually see the different facets because it's called an icosphere. So it's it's essentially a icosahedron, but it also means that there's not too much geometry. So we're minimizing the amount of geometry, and we can change that by using a so-called modifier. So what a modifier is an algorithm that acts upon your object and makes something different out of your mesh. And a subdivision modifier is pretty much what it sounds like. It just makes everything a lot rounder and nicer. So you can see this is a level 1. We'll crank it up to level 2, and also change the shading to smooth. And there you have your nice smooth atoms. And the upside of that is that your file size will be a lot smaller, of course, and everything will be zippier, and you're able to manipulate everything really fast because you can set it to 0 subdivisions, so which means just the original object in your viewport, and 2 subdivisions at render time. So if we go back into render mode, and if we go back and render, you'll see now we've got nice shaded spheres. To actually give it a little bit of a plastic appearance, I might just add the ambient occlusion. It usually gives it a lot more plastic appearance. With this sort of lighting, with the environment lighting all switched on, I think we're not going to get too much of the lighting out of it. But anyway, that's a technique you're going to be using if you want to do some, close-up stuff where the atoms are supposed to be looking like spheres, and you can play around a little bit with the visualization and the lighting and everything. Yeah, and that's it. That's it for this tutorial. And the next tutorial, we're going to dive a little bit into animation.